The drive to transform Nigeria's power sector and end blackouts in sub-Saharan Africa's second largest economy is attracting significant private sector participation. Nigeria's President Goodluck Jonathan signed deals on Monday handing over state electricity assets to 15 bidding companies, a milestone in the privatization process. And CNBC Africa's Umu Ibrahim caught up with an investor, David Ladipo, managing director at Azura, and started by asking what drives investor confidence in the ongoing reforms. Take a look.
There is a huge gap between supply and demand in Nigeria. So it's very obvious to investors that this is a market that you want to come into. There is a huge wave of capital waiting to come into the Nigerian electricity sector. What they have required is a regulatory environment, a policy environment, which will assure them that if they make those investments will be bankable and replicable. What's happened in the last 3 years is the government has put in place that regulatory environment, that policy environment, and has done that in a very consistent fashion. And it's precisely that which has given confidence to us as investors to say, okay, we're going to take the plunge and we're going to make early stage investments in a market which we know is guaranteed to grow.
Once the privatization process has been completed, how significant do you think this is for Nigeria, and how do you think the multiplier effects on the wider economy will manifest themselves?
I think the conclusion of the privatization process will have a tremendous impact on the sector as a whole, but also on the wider economy. But that's something which everybody knows. If you look at the rate of growth in Nigeria at the moment, in the non-oil sector, it's averaging about 7 to 8% a year. So tremendous growth in the non-oil sector. It's an incredibly dynamic country. It's a dynamic country with 160 million people and 4,500 megawatts of actual power generating capacity at the moment. If Nigeria were to have the same per capita consumption of electricity as South Africa, we would need to have well over 100,000 megawatts of power generating capacity. What that means in the context of our investment, for example, so we have been developing a project in Edo State, which is 450 megawatts, $700 million. We need 100 projects of the same scale to get to a per capita consumption of electricity, which is 1/3 the size of South Africa's. And what that tells you is two things. It tells you that the gap in terms of investment over the last 30 years has been really quite appalling. It tells you something positive, though. What it tells you is that once you start to inject electricity into the economy, which is one of the most powerful forces for economic growth, the multiplier effects of that will really be transformative. So I think once the privatization process has concluded, once the acquirers have been able to get their hands on the assets and properly control the growth of those assets, I think we will have a country which will see growth levels in double digits for 20 to 30 years and will really be the miracle of the African continent.
In the past, investors would complain, about business processes with Nigerian government. Were you surprised at the extent to which the government, has been responsive to the needs of investors?
Yes, we were surprised. If you speak to those who were very skeptical pre the roadmap, so pre-2010, they will admit, they will say pre-2010, their view was that if there was policy reform of the sector, it would be of a very dirigiste fashion. So it would be a sort of top-down implementation of policy reform, as opposed to a bottom-up process. What's happened with this government is that they've really listened to investors. If you listen to the speech that Mr. President made this morning, you will have noticed that one of the things he stressed was that the government was in listening mode throughout the last 3 years. And what they did is they said to investors, what is it that will make your projects bankable? How will you get the finance in order to make these projects come to reality? Tell us, and then we will listen to you, and we will try to craft the policies and regulations which will give you that level playing field, which was the term which Mr. President used this morning. And the extent to which they listened has really taken us by surprise.
In the past, investors would complain, about business processes with Nigerian government. Were you surprised at the extent to which the government, has been responsive to the needs of investors?
That's a good question for us, in as much as we want to invest more than we are currently investing. So the project, as I said, that we're currently focused on is the Azura Edo IPP, which is a 450 megawatt project, circa $700 million of capital. We have acquired land which will allow for the expansion of that project, so we can build a second phase of the IPP. And we're also looking at a number of other projects in other locations within Nigeria. So our ambition at Azura Power is to develop a independent power producing company which will have in, say, 5 to 10 years somewhere in the region of 2,000 to 3,000 megawatts. Now, that sounds incredibly ambitious from the starting point that we are now. Because if you look at the total, as I said, the total actual power generating capacity is 4,500 megawatts at the moment. So if we say at Azura we want to have 2,000 to 3,000 megawatts within the next 5 years,